In Tama City Hono Academy, Kanon, a beautiful demon, watches over the school from the disciplinary committee's window. Suddenly, a boy named Yuji enters the room in a trance-like state. However, the moment he crosses the threshold, the spell breaks and his awareness returns. Kanon informs him that she had summoned his soul because she intends to devour him. Yuji reacts with bewilderment rather than fear, prompting Kanon to transform into her demon form and introduce herself proudly as a gourmet demon. Before arriving in the human world, Kanon resided in the demon realm, where extravagant platters were presented to her daily. However, food never tasted good to her. She decided to visit her father, Beelzebub. She admitted that ordinary food no longer satisfied her. She wanted to try devouring human souls, particularly those of young humans. She explained that she planned to nurture them carefully before consuming them. Beelzebub ultimately decided that the experience would be beneficial for her growth. However, before she could leave, he casually asked whether she had shared a meal with anyone recently. Kanon reassured him that she had not dined with anyone. Satisfied with her answer, Beelzebub wished her luck before returning his attention to his meal. Upon arriving in the human world, Kanon disguised herself as a strikingly beautiful high school girl. She quickly adapted to her new environment and excelled in nearly every aspect of school life, gaining the trust and admiration of the people around her, which secured her a position on the disciplinary committee. Standing on the school rooftop, she looked down at the humans. To her, the school had become her personal pasture. One morning, her hunger finally became impossible to ignore. She decided it was time to feast on at least one soul. She scanned the crowd until a particular soul caught her attention, and it was Yuji's. Without hesitation, she placed him under a trance and silently commanded him to come to the disciplinary committee's office. Now standing before her, Yuji remains confused, and Kanon begins describing how she intends to prepare him. However, Yuji completely misinterprets her words and assumes she is flirting with him. To her surprise, he suddenly kneels and bows deeply, thanking her for paying attention to him. Kanon is confused as Yuji explains that it has always been his dream to be devoured by a beautiful girl like her. He even adds that the fact that her demon cosplay makes the situation better. Realizing that Yuji has a very different understanding of the word devour, Kanon begins to panic internally. Yuji starts undressing as Kanon begins convincing herself that she can simply take his soul during the act. However, she becomes nervous when she realizes she has no experience with intimacy. When Yuji pulls off his shirt, Kanon hurriedly insists that he should only share intimacy with someone he loves. Yuji steps closer and reassures her that he already likes her. He assumes that she must have summoned him because she liked him first. The statement catches Kanon off guard as she silently wonders what it truly means to like someone. As she studies Yuji more carefully, she suddenly notices that he is actually handsome. Yuji continues insisting that he likes her, causing Kanon to panic. She attempts to steady herself, reminding herself that she is a powerful demon and should remain in control. During her internal turmoil, Yuji quietly puts his clothes back on, assuming that he had overwhelmed her. Kanon notices his consideration and briefly thinks that he is being surprisingly thoughtful. However, her composure shatters again when he casually suggests they could still fool around in other ways. Seeing Kanon struggle, Yuji decides to suggest that they should start by dating instead. To her own surprise, the suggestion immediately calms her down. After a moment of hesitation, she agrees. Yuji's face lights up with excitement, as if he has just won the lottery. He quickly finishes putting on the rest of his uniform and rushes out of the room. Left alone, she starts to believe that she may have been tricked. Later that day, Yuji's childhood friend Nadeshiko asks if he can help clean her family's shrine. Yuji declines by casually mentioning that he has a girlfriend. At first, Nadeshiko treats it like nothing. Then the meaning suddenly sinks in and she reacts in shock. Yuji happily explains that Kanon is a senior at their school. Nadeshiko becomes genuinely happy for him and asks if he has a nickname for her. When Yuji looks at her in confusion, she explains that lovers usually have nicknames for each other. She feels like Yuji is the type to call a girlfriend by her first name, which gives Yuji an idea. Meanwhile, Kanon is looking over the other students when Yuji suddenly appears before her, causing her to fall back in surprise. He jumps through the window, insisting that Kanon call him by his first name since they are dating. She begins to grow nervous, but then decides to use this to her advantage. She starts to tease him, intending to let him know their hierarchy with each other. However, Yuji actually looks excited at her teasing. His reaction is so bright that she admits to herself that he is kind of cute. She tries calling out his name, but struggles to get even the first syllable out. So she repeats his name in her head before trying again. Unfortunately, it results in the same outcome. Yuji asks if she is embarrassed, but Kanon tries to hide it by demanding that he call her by her first name first. He does so without hesitation, which surprises Kanon and even makes her feel excited. After experiencing that brief sense of bliss, she regains her composure and assumes that Yuji also wants to feel the same thing. He begins to coax her into saying his name, even whispering into her ear. This makes Kanon panic and feel even more embarrassed. She tries to resist his charm, knowing that if she allows herself to enjoy the sound of her name from him, she might end up falling for Yuji. To break the moment, she slaps him away and reminds him to add senpai at the end to be respectful. With him now at a distance, she moves toward the door but manages to say somewhat proper goodbye while finally saying his name. Yuji immediately brightens. Then, while she is leaving, he calls after her again, causing her to stumble. When she finally reaches the stairs, she wonders why her feelings feel so mixed. Suddenly, she notices two students flirting with each other and quickly scolds them. Upon recognizing her, the students separate and run away. She reflects that humans always give in to their desires, and as she watches the other students, she vows to make sure their souls will not be tainted so that she can devour them all someday. Yuji suddenly appears behind her, mentioning that he wants to be like those couples someday, which immediately sends Kanon into a panic. She decides that now is the time to put him in his place. After putting some distance between them, she asks what Yuji really wants. This question confuses him, since he believes it is normal for couples to want to be together. Then he casually asks where she wants their first time to be. As he talks about it, Kanon suddenly stiffens, then panics because he is already thinking about locations. She feels herself growing frustrated because Yuji is moving too fast, since things like that are supposed to happen after marriage. She composes herself outwardly and asks where he would like to go instead. Yuji honestly tells her that he would like to go to the park, which makes Kanon nervous again since he seems willing to do it in a public space. Yuji explains that he wants it to be memorable so that every time they pass by the park, they will remember it. However, Kanon feels overwhelmed and quickly asks for a different place. He then suggests that they go to the movies, which only flusters and frustrates Kanon even more since it is still a public setting. So he decides that they should plan a trip together. This idea briefly excites Kanon, but she immediately thinks he is shameless when he suddenly suggests going to the hot springs. She quickly explains that something memorable should happen in the privacy of a room. As she continues complaining, Yuji calmly writes down in his notes that their first time should be in his room. Kanon rolls on the ground in embarrassment, and Yuji crawls on top of her, mentioning how touched he is that they are seriously discussing how to make many good memories on their first date. Kanon pauses, then suddenly screams as she realizes that she had misunderstood the meaning of first time. She hurriedly tries to cover up her mistake by acting confident and firmly declares that their first date will be in his room while his parents are around. With that, she quickly scurries away in embarrassment. At the end of the school day, Kanon watches the students head home when Yuji appears beside her and invites her to walk home with him. She is shocked and asks why she has to walk home with him. He simply answers that he is her boyfriend, and that statement immediately makes her heart flutter. She decides to act confident and humor him by agreeing, since this is once again another perfect opportunity to prove that she is above him. However, during the walk home, she immediately begins to lag behind because her heart is racing, causing her to feel unusually exhausted. When Yuji asks why she is not walking beside him, she tries to cover it up by saying that it is dangerous, so he needs to act as her shield. This only encourages Yuji to protect her, so he pulls her closer than before, reassuring her that he can protect her from anything. He then offers his hand to keep her close, but Kanon only stares at it. She begins to panic because she believes that holding hands will somehow result in her getting pregnant, and she curses him for being so romantic. His hand suddenly looks threatening to her, yet she knows she needs to make a decision. A little later, people begin staring at them because Kanon has decided to tie his hands together so she can hold the other end of the rope. She tells him that this is what holding her hand means and asks how Yuji feels about it. To her surprise, Yuji seems to be enjoying the treatment because to him, it shows how much Kanon does not want to let him go. He believes that her desire to dominate him both mentally and physically is her expression of love. She becomes so embarrassed by his declaration that she ends up running away from him. She walks toward the park, hoping to clear her head, but soon begins hearing Yuji's voice. She thinks it is just a figment of her imagination. But when she turns around, she realizes that he is actually being dragged along the ground because she forgot that she is still holding the other end of the rope tied to his hands. He suddenly gets up and admits that it was the most exciting walk he has ever had. He even shares that being treated like a pet might actually be enjoyable. When she turns away from him in frustration, he tries to remedy the situation by inviting her to try something. Kanon's mind immediately jumps to something inappropriate, so she is surprised when they end up sitting on a bench with croquettes in hand. Yuji shares that he has always wanted to eat together with his girlfriend. Kanon visibly relaxes and reaches into the plastic bag for the sauces, but Yuji quickly tells her not to add any because it tastes amazing and adding sauce would be disrespectful. Kanon wonders why he is making such a big deal out of it and tells him that she will eat it the way she wants. However, Yuji begins passionately explaining why the croquette is already perfect on its own. His explanation makes her giggle because she never expected Yuji to feel so strongly about eating a croquette. She decides to humor him and agrees to eat it plain. When she takes a bite, she is shocked by how good it tastes because before eating it, nothing had ever tasted good to her. Beside her, Yuji also comments that it somehow tastes better today, but he concludes that the reason must be that he is eating it next to her. Kanon is surprised by his reasoning, yet she continues eating more earnestly, while Yuji happily comments on how cute she looks when she eats, which makes her blush. One day in the underworld, Beelzebub eats while wondering how Kanon is doing in the human world. He keeps eating out of worry, to the point that his maid, Ami, begins to express concern over his troubled state. He shares that he is worried about Kanon, and Ami immediately volunteers to head to the human world to serve her. When he gives his blessing, she smiles wickedly to herself. In the human world, Kanon wakes up from her slumber. She opens her eyes in her room inside a house belonging to a family she had brainwashed into believing that she is the couple's daughter. Her fake parents and little brother greet her as usual, and in their eyes, Kanon is the perfect eldest daughter. Kanon politely bids them goodbye as she prepares to go to school, showing affection to her brother and mother. She chose this family because they seemed kind, and exploiting kindness is what demons do best. Suddenly, the family begins to feel that something is off, forcing Kanon to strengthen the hypnosis placed on them. Once she is finished, she finally leaves for school. She smiles to herself, feeling refreshed after toying with humans, especially since she has been slacking off lately and not acting like a proper demon. As she wonders to herself what humans truly are, she begins muttering the answer, but then hears Yuji asking what she is doing. She is shocked to see him standing in front of her house, but Yuji simply states that since he is her boyfriend, he wants to walk to school together. It takes her a moment to recover, but once she does, she demands to know how he found her house. Yuji admits that he had asked Yuriko, Kanon's homeroom teacher, and that Yuriko had willingly given him the information due to being a fan of romance. He then tries inviting her to walk with him, and she decides to allow it on the condition that he keeps up with her. Without explaining herself, she suddenly dashes forward, confident that her abilities as a demon will allow her to shake Yuji off. However, as she runs, she quickly feels herself getting tired and begins to slow down. Yuji eventually jogs beside her and asks if she is tired. Kanon tries hard not to admit that her stamina is the weakest among all her abilities. But since she clearly looks like she is struggling, Yuji finds it hard to believe her denial. To hide her weakness, she tries to reason that a woman must always walk behind her man. She feels like the saying might make her sound dignified, but Yuji quickly points out that the phrase is meant for wives, which embarrasses her even more. She attempts to hide her embarrassment again, so Yuji hands her a bottle of water so she can cool off with a drink, but asks her to save some for him so he can drink later. As she prepares to drink the water, Kanon begins to wonder if Yuji is giving it to her so he can get an indirect kiss from her. Her gaze drifts back and forth between the bottle and Yuji. Determined to gain the upper hand, she gulps down the entire contents of the bottle and then throws it away. Near the school, Ami tries to locate Kanon and becomes excited when she notices her walking nearby. She immediately approaches Kanon, but Kanon looks furious and quickly drives Ami away to the disciplinary committee room. Once they are alone, Kanon scolds Ami and demands to know why she is in the human world. Ami acts delighted and even pulls Kanon into her chest as she happily explains that she came to serve her. Kanon pushes her away, but at that moment, Yuji appears and asks who Ami is. To avoid suspicion, Kanon explains that Ami has been her maid since she was little, hiding the fact that Ami is a demon. However, Kanon secretly believes that Ami must have tricked Beelzebub into letting her travel to the human world for personal reasons. Pretending to be hurt, Ami once again smothers Kanon against her chest, insisting that she truly came just to serve her. Kanon immediately realizes that Ami is the worst possible demon for Yuji to meet because Ami openly encourages cheating on partners, and Kanon fears that Yuji might willingly accept such an offer given how eager he was to be her boyfriend. She tries to keep the two apart and warns Yuji to stay away from Ami. Ami notices that Kanon seems unusually protective of Yuji and playfully asks to be introduced to him properly. However, after carefully studying Yuji, she realizes that his soul is of extremely high quality. Without hesitation, she suddenly pounces on him, intending to devour him herself. Kanon quickly pulls her off Yuji and firmly declares that Yuji is off limits. This confuses Ami, and Kanon finds herself shyly admitting that Yuji is her boyfriend. Ami immediately becomes excited upon hearing the news, and because Kanon is clearly embarrassed, she takes the opportunity to tease her even more about her relationship. She eagerly asks for all the juicy details but becomes very disappointed when Kanon admits that they have only gone as far as holding hands and eating together. Ami concludes that Kanon is far too innocent to be a proper demon, since she gets flustered so easily. She insists that Kanon only needs to let Yuji touch her, and he will stay completely devoted to her. However, Kanon calls the idea indecent, despite being a demon herself. Ami then warns Kanon that if she moves too slowly, she might end up eating Yuji herself instead. However, Yuji firmly refuses her offer and declares that Kanon is the only girl for him. Outwardly, Kanon pretends to be annoyed by his statement, but deep down she feels genuinely happy about his loyalty, something that Ami immediately notices. Ami continues teasing them, suggesting that she would not mind if the three of them entered a relationship together, claiming that it is perfectly fine for Yuji to have multiple girlfriends. Kanan tries to argue with her, but Ami clings to Yuji in an attempt to make him agree. However, Yuji only looks confused and asks Kanan if he somehow became popular, which only makes her more irritated. Later, Kanan notices that several students are passed out along the hallway. They all have blissful expressions on their faces, and the trail seems to lead toward the science lab. She overhears some students talking about how attractive a dark-skinned maid is, so she immediately rushes toward the lab, feeling that Ami is behind all of this. When she enters, she catches Ami and Yuriko just as they are about to kiss. Yuriko becomes embarrassed after being caught and quickly runs away, while Ami remains completely calm and satisfied with herself. Kanan becomes furious because the humans Ami had been feeding on were the very souls she had worked hard to nurture. Kanan herself had not even fed on a single one of them yet. Ami casually complains that it is Kanan's fault for being too slow. Kanan argues that Ami is too easy, which prompts Ami to defend herself by claiming that she only feeds on people she finds charming. Kanan does not believe her and begins pointing out Ami's questionable choices among her prey, but Ami calmly responds that each of them had something she personally found charming. Kanan becomes frustrated because this only proves that Ami can feed on almost anyone. Ami then justifies her actions by explaining that all of them had been kind and charming to her when they first met. Kanan is genuinely surprised by this explanation because it shows that Ami is capable of seeing the good in others, something she never expected from her personality. She slowly begins to understand why Ami is so popular, even among the other maids back in the demon world. However, this realization does not excuse the chaos she caused at school. Kanan starts by apologizing to Ami for misjudging her and acknowledges that Ami does, in fact, have standards. Still, she firmly warns Ami not to feed on students within the school grounds because it makes memory erasure extremely troublesome. Ami agrees and promises that she will only target non-students in the future. Kanan then nervously asks whether Ami finds Yuji charming. Ami immediately recognizes the name as Kanan's boyfriend, and upon noticing Kanan's flustered expression, she deliberately chooses not to reveal her true thoughts about him. Kanan desperately tries to remain indifferent, but Ami can clearly tell that she's becoming jealous and curious. A little later, as Kanan patrols the school grounds, she finds herself worrying that Yuji might fall for Ami someday. She imagines the possibility happening right under her nose and pictures Yuji already falling under Ami's charm. The thought causes her to pace faster and faster until she suddenly comes up with an idea. She decides to allow Yuji to follow her around school while she performs her disciplinary duties. To her, this is the best way to keep an eye on him so Ami will not be able to make a move. She also believes this is the perfect opportunity to teach Yuji about their hierarchy and remind him that he will always be beneath her. As she thinks this, she unknowingly releases a cold aura that Yuji can clearly feel. Nearby, a girl suddenly trips and drops her papers, and Yuji immediately rushes over to help her. He even offers to carry the papers to the faculty office, which causes the girl to quickly develop a crush on him. Kanan notices this and immediately steps between them, instructing the girl to return to her class since she's already fine. After the girl leaves without question, Kanan asks Yuji if he is popular, but Yuji seems completely unaware of his own charm. She suddenly remembers Ami's teasing about jealousy and desperately tries to prove that she is not jealous at all. Unfortunately, Ami happens to witness the entire interaction from nearby. Later, another girl accidentally bumps into Yuji and immediately falls for him after seeing his face. Kanan quickly calls his attention. Soon after, a different girl slips on the stairs, and once again, Yuji manages to catch her, forcing Kanan to guide him away yet again. Later still, Yuji approaches a rich girl named Perika because there is a fish cake-shaped object on her hair. She corrects him by explaining that it is actually a decorative hair clip, but she uses the opportunity to flirt with him, which only irritates Kanan even more because it feels like every romantic comedy trope is suddenly happening around her. She finally decides to complain to Yuji for attracting so many girls. She calls him irresponsible for being such a heartthrob and insists that she will make him understand his proper position. Yuji calmly responds that his position is her boyfriend. Kanan blushes because he clearly understands his role and is confident about it. Because of that, she decides not to punish him. Suddenly, his phone rings and he notices a message from Nadeshiko. Kanan grows curious, so Yuji explains that Nadeshiko is his childhood friend from the same class. She reads their exchange and notices how familiar they seem with each other. Although Yuji sees nothing wrong, the idea of him being close to another girl bothers Kanan, so she grabs his phone and begins insulting him. After school, as they walk home, Kanan deliberately keeps some distance between them, causing Yuji to ask if she is angry with him. She denies it at first, but later stops and presses her head against his chest. She complains that he already belongs to her, so he cannot go around flirting with other girls. When she looks up, Yuji notices tears forming in her eyes. He tells her that he finds this jealous side of her adorable. Kanan tries to argue, but she becomes distracted when he starts petting her hair. An unfamiliar, warm, and giddy feeling begins to spread through her body from the affection he shows. She tries to resist it, but the more he pats and scratches her head, the more she finds herself melting under his attention. From the rooftop, Ami watches the two of them with amusement, fascinated that Kanan has chosen to date a human of all creatures. However, behind her, Ami looks at Yuriko's blissful state. One day, Kanan catches Yuji and Nadeshiko eating lunch together on a non-school day, which immediately irritates her. Ami, who notices Kanan fuming nearby, snickers to herself, sensing that this might be fun to watch. Yuji seems completely unaware of Kanan's mood and happily greets her, but Kanan immediately demands to know who the other girl is. Yuji introduces her as Nadeshiko, his classmate, but Nadeshiko quickly corrects him and insists that her name is Nadeko. Kanan recalls seeing the name Nadeko in Yuji's chat logs where he described her as his childhood friend, which leads Kanan to suspect that Nadeshiko is trying to steal Yuji away from her. In front of her, Nadeshiko scolds Yuji for calling her by her last name again and insists that he use something cuter instead. This only bothers Kanan further. Nadeshiko then apologizes for her familiarity with Yuji, explaining that it comes from their long history together. Ami finally approaches the group and casually asks if Nadeshiko has any fond memories of Yuji. Kanan is shocked to see her, but Ami ignores her. Nadeshiko entertains the question and shares that she used to play with Yuji at the nearby park and even had sleepovers with him. Nadeshiko even shares an embarrassing story about how Yuji once wet the bed. Yuji quickly corrects her, insisting that he only spilled juice. Nadeshiko fondly remarks that Yuji used to be much cuter when he was younger. Hearing all this, Kanan quietly sits down, feeling her irritation grow as she realizes how close and familiar they are. Nadeshiko senses the hostility and notices that it is coming from Kanan. Feeling uneasy, she asks Yuji why Kanan is acting so strangely toward her. Yuji casually explains that the girl is Kanan, his girlfriend. Nadeshiko blushes in surprise and finally understands why Kanan has been glaring at her the entire time. Wanting to clear things up, she stands and tells Kanan that she and Yuji are not dating, and that they only became close because of their parents. Kanan responds with a smug expression and asks if she is bragging. Nadeshiko struggles to explain further and ends up blurting out random details about her relationship with Yuji, each one sounding like a stab to Kanan as it highlights how close they are. Eventually, Kanan says she has heard enough, which relieves Nadeshiko. However, when Nadeshiko looks at her again, she notices Kanan smiling in a way that feels threatening as she coldly says that she will skin Nadeshiko alive and throw her remains into the demon world. Realizing that Kanan still misunderstands, Nadeshiko panics and begs Yuji to explain things properly. However, Yuji is completely mesmerized by how bright Kanan's smile is. Nadeshiko grows increasingly desperate, trying to fix the situation by praising Kanan. She even says that Kanan and Yuji make a perfect couple, but none of it seems to calm her down. Trembling under Kanan's gaze, she tries to shake Yuji out of his daze so he can help her, but he remains completely captivated. Suddenly, Kanan appears behind Nadeshiko and slowly approaches her, describing how she intends to torture her. Nadeshiko backs away, continuing to praise her in hopes of stopping her. In her panic, she suddenly blurts out that Kanan is Yuji's wife. That statement unexpectedly works. Kanan immediately turns into a blushing girl, both pleased and embarrassed by being called Yuji's wife. Nadeshiko stares at her in disbelief but is startled again when Kanan steps closer. Kanan then compliments her and giddily explains that she and Yuji are still too early in their relationship to be thinking about marriage. She then straightens up and fixes Nadeshiko with a cold stare, saying that she likes her but then calls her a lowly creature, which shocks Nadeshiko. Moments later, Kanan starts gushing again over being called a wife, while Nadeshiko processes everything that just happened. Strangely, she finds that she does not mind being called a lowly creature. Back at Kanan's home, Ami talks about how much fun she has been having in the human world, which confirms Kanan's suspicion that Ami came here for her own amusement rather than to serve her. Ami casually pours tea for herself and tells Kanan to pour her own if she wants some. She then mentions that she is hoping to see a more intense love rivalry next time. Kanan pouts and complains that Yuji is too bold for entering a love contract with her while still spending time with another girl. She admits that she also wants to have lunch with Yuji, but after noticing Ami's reaction, she quickly takes it back. She insists that she still has her pride as a demon and refuses to eat alongside her livestock. So frustrated, she pulls Shotaro onto her lap and starts pinching his cheeks to relieve stress. Ami then expresses concern that Kanan might be developing genuine feelings for Yuji, warning that it could lead to heartbreak once she eventually devours his soul. Kanan looks confused at first, then suddenly realizes that she had completely forgotten her original goal. Startled, she pushes Shotaro off her lap and tries to refocus on her objective. However, she quickly convinces herself that the situation actually works in her favor. All she needs to do is charm Yuji enough during this battle, and once he falls completely in love with her, he will willingly offer his soul. After hearing her plan, Ami casually suggests that the next step would be for them to go on a date. The idea immediately flusters Kanan, but she tries to remain composed and asks why a date is even necessary. Ami explains that it is the best way for Kanan to make Yuji fall for her and adds that since they are already lovers, going on dates is completely normal. Kanan suddenly becomes shy and tells Ami that she is inexperienced with dates and does not know what to prepare in order to go on one. She wonders if it requires parental consent or even a contract. Ami gives her a side hug to calm her down. Ami tells Kanan that dates are simple, and that they just mean spending time with Yuji, and at the end of it, allowing herself to be devoured by him. To prove a point, she bites on Kanan's ear, easily flustering her. Kanan quickly pushes Ami off, and they both decide to skip the last part, but Ami insists that Kanan should still be the one to invite Yuji out on a date. However, Kanan seems too nervous. Ami points out that Nadeshiko was able to do it, though Kanan argues that Nadeshiko and Yuji were not on a date. Ami does not back down and insists that it was, using the opportunity to tell Kanan that she is slower than Nadeshiko, which is sad considering Kanan is supposed to be a greater being. It works and Kanan decides that tomorrow she will ask Yuji out on a date. She decides to leave for her room so she can pick out an outfit. Kanan's human parents look at her and find it amusing that she is in love, but then something clicks as they do not recall ever hiring a maid like Ami in their household. The next day, Kanan summons Yuji to the disciplinary office and he wonders why she suddenly needs him. Kanan calmly drinks her tea as she tells Yuji that she happens to be free this weekend. However, her hands shake and she has trouble asking him out properly. Ami silently cheers her on beside her, and even Yuji is confused since her words are not coming out. Kanan decides to say she was looking for someone to exercise with, which disappoints Ami. She tries again, attempting to say that they should go out after exercising, but then ends up using the word duel instead of date. She tries to take it back, but this time her nervousness still gets the better of her, and she tells Yuji that she wants to go on a protest march. Yuji does not seem to mind and has a vague idea of what she wants, which is still completely off the mark, making Ami wonder how idiotic humans really are. As Yuji expresses excitement over the coming weekend, Kanan grows frustrated and exclaims that she has been trying to ask him out on a date. She grabs him by the front of his shirt and demands that if he is free this weekend, they should meet at the station at 11. When she closes the door, she suddenly feels overwhelmed and shy about what she just did. Ami pats her head, proud that she pulled through. Meanwhile, Yuji is still in the room processing what just happened. On their date, Yuji is ecstatic that their destination is the Tokyo Skytree. They head up to the view deck and Kanan giggles at Yuji's excitement. She then snickers wickedly because this is all part of her plan to make him fall for her. She plans on inciting fear in Yuji, which she will mistake for love. Yuji approaches her again, complimenting her casual wear, which makes her laugh. Kanan thinks now is the perfect time to plant fear in his heart. She heads to the window and mentions how scary it is, trying to encourage Yuji to look down as well. However, before she can grab his hand, Yuji moves in the other direction, mentioning that the view is beautiful in another area. Kanan gets the feeling that he is avoiding her, because Yuji is always the one eager to hold her hand. She studies his face and notices he looks a bit nervous, and she gets the idea that he might genuinely be afraid. She figures this can work to her advantage. She tries to tease him, hinting for him to admit his fear of heights. He even resists when Kanan starts pulling him toward the windows. She tries really hard, even clinging to his arm. However, the movement causes his arm to hit her chest, and Kanan realizes she forgot something important. Yuji gets nervous, but his curiosity cannot take it anymore, and he asks if she happened to forget something. Kanan admits that she did not put on an important article of clothing before leaving, not mentioning that she actually forgot it due to how nervous she was. She asks if that is the reason Yuji has been avoiding her. He nods, and Kanan suddenly becomes extremely embarrassed. Yuji tries to ask if she forgot it on purpose, and though she is nervous, she tries to sound brave and tells him that it was all part of the plan to make his heart race. Though her face is completely red, she smiles at him and asks if his heart is racing. He loudly declares that it is, which makes her ask if her plan was a success, which he praises her for. He then asks if he can hug her again, but Kanan is too embarrassed and falls to her knees again in defeat. Later, they are back on the ground having a snack, though Kanan feels too defeated to bother eating. Yuji encourages her to eat some of the takoyaki he bought, even offering to feed her some. Kanan keeps her head down at first, but decides it might actually be nice to be fed by Yuji, so she lifts her head up. Yuji asks if she is shy, which she loudly denies. She leans closer, hesitant at first, but eventually opens her mouth wide enough to take the takoyaki from the stick. She eats and proudly announces that she managed to eat it, asking if she did okay. She is surprised to see Yuji looking happy and questions his expression. Yuji says he is simply satisfied. Kanan then offers to feed him, and as he leans in to take the takoyaki from her, she suddenly puts it in her own mouth. She then smiles at him smugly and teases him. To her surprise, Yuji looks at her with so much affection. He tells her that despite this being their first date, she looked gloomy earlier, so he is happy that she is smiling again. He mentions how much he loves her smile, which causes Kanan's heart to flutter. She turns away from him, slowly starting to realize that she might actually like Yuji. Yuji asks what they should do next, saying that anything to make her happy is fine with him. Kanan feels guilty because all Yuji has been thinking about is keeping her happy while she has been plotting to eat his soul. She picks up another takoyaki and offers it to him, mentioning that she wants to try again. Yuji gets excited and thinks they will be redoing something else, and Kanan argues that this time she will eat him for real. One day, Ami spends her time reviewing the pictures she took of Kanan and Yuji. She finds herself getting excited because this means Kanan is getting closer to kissing Yuji and eventually becoming intimate with him. She then notices something that piques her interest. Kanan's class has just finished PE, and she happens to cross Yuji's path, causing both of them to blush. By this time, Ami has moved downstairs, loving the atmosphere. Yuji compliments Kanan, but Kanan tells him not to get near her, which makes Ami think the relationship has actually worsened. Even Yuji is shocked because he thought their relationship was going well. He then tries to fish for an answer to her sudden distance and grows increasingly desperate as Kanan keeps avoiding the question. When he wails and drops to the ground, Kanan admits that she does not want him near her right now because she is sweaty and smelly. This awakens something in Yuji as he declares that he wants to smell her, insisting that it is only natural for a boyfriend to want to smell his girlfriend's sweat. He even tells her that he could use one of her socks as a mask, which disgusts Kanan. Yuji is not deterred and begins approaching her with a crazed look in his eye. She backs up until she falls onto a seat. Yuji continues his advances, declaring that since it is the sweat of someone he loves, he is sure to love it. For some reason, Kanan is touched, so she decides to agree to let him have a smell. She lifts her shirt toward him. Yuji kneels in front of her and begins smelling her shirt. Kanan is embarrassed over the situation before realizing that she should actually be offended because Yuji is using her for his own desires. She wants to put him in his place, but when she observes him, Kanan notices that he is aggressively sniffing her shirt. She begins feeling more self-conscious because she can feel her sweat rolling down. Yuji suddenly announces that her sweat smells like laundry detergent, which disappoints Kanan because he did not actually smell her natural scent. Kanan's frustration leads her to drop her towel, so Yuji offers his own towel for her to use. As Kanan wipes her face, she catches a whiff of something citrusy. She realizes she is smelling Yuji's natural scent, and to her, she finds it oddly comforting. When she realizes where her thoughts are drifting, she stops herself before it is too late. Yuji suddenly asks Kanan what his towel smells like, and she replies that there is no specific scent, then quickly corrects herself by saying that she did not smell anything because she was not sniffing it. To hide her embarrassment, she begins hurling insults his way. Ami observes them, a little disappointed. She believes it will take 5,000 years before they can even kiss. Wanting to push them in the right direction, Ami decides to become their Cupid of love. Later, while walking the halls, Kanan notices something odd with her hearing. She tells Yuji that she can only hear up to 100 meters today, when usually she can hear the entire school. Yuji is amazed by her skills, so Kanan boasts about them a little more. She tells him that aside from her usual patrol, she is also using her ears to spot misbehaving students, and that her ears are called devil ears. Kanan then hears a weird voice telling her to get her ears cleaned while resting in Yuji's lap. Even Yuji hears it, and they both spot Ami whispering loudly at them on repeat. For some reason, the suggestion seems to captivate Yuji, and he's quick to bring them back to the office so Kanan can rest on his lap as he prepares to clean her ears. He reassures her that she can be confident in his ear-cleaning abilities. At first, Kanan gets nervous, but then she manages to convince herself that Yuji is in his rightful place, since this is basically him serving her. So she gives him permission to clean her ears. Kanan feels herself relaxing into his lap, mildly reminded of how her mother used to clean her ears. Then she suddenly remembers something important about a demon's ears. Yuji touches her outer ear so he can get a better look, but this triggers a reaction from Kanan. She is overwhelmed by the sensation and realizes that her outer canal is very sensitive. She feels even more overwhelmed when the ear-cleaning pick is inserted. She covers her mouth to prevent any sound from escaping. She becomes mildly aware of how deep the tool is in her canal, making her panic that her eardrum might rupture. As Yuji is completely absorbed in the task at hand, Kanan desperately tries to keep her voice down as she squirms. Ami stares at them in amusement, knowing that Kanan will give in soon. Yuji takes the moment to admire Kanan's ears. He compliments their unique shape and softness. He feels Kanan's breath fanning against his thighs and silently thanks whoever gave him the idea to clean her ears this way. Meanwhile, Kanan is overwhelmed with so many new sensations at once. She knows that if this keeps up, she will most likely faint, but admitting weakness would mean that Yuji is above her. To her surprise, she manages to get through the cleaning of one of her ears. Yuji asks how his cleaning technique was, and she refuses to admit that it was actually very good. So to prove himself, Yuji decides that he should also clean Kanan's other ear, and Kanan pales since she had a hard time surviving the first one. Nadeshiko walks the halls intending to look for Yuji. When she nears the disciplinary office, she hears a lot of odd noises coming from both Yuji and Kanan. She falls to the ground as she tries to make sense of what she is hearing and is shocked when Kanan slides open the door to leave, while Yuji is left devastated in the room. Ami, on the other hand, is quite pleased with how she is handling her role as Cupid. On a different day, the heat is intense, so Ami lounges by an inflatable pool in the office. Kanan envies Ami's free spirit. She is suffering due to the heat, and even the air conditioning in the office is down today. Suddenly, Yuji enters, asking if Kanan had called for him. Kanan is confused, but Ami is pleased that he finally arrived and proudly shows off her swimsuit, which excites Yuji. His reaction makes Kanan pout slightly, which Ami teases her about. She tries to convince Kanan to wear a swimsuit as well. However, Kanan refuses, claiming to be too noble to wear something like a swimsuit in public. However, she feels challenged when she sees how Yuji compliments and takes photos of Ami. Her jealousy becomes too strong, so she changes into her school swimsuit, which causes both Yuji and Ami to cheer. Yuji is quick to start complimenting her, and it does not take Kanan long to enter the pool with Ami and splash around for Yuji's eyes to enjoy. Kanan feels oddly exposed under his gaze. She knows Yuji is only staring, but due to his intensity, it feels like something much more intimate is happening. She suddenly slaps his eyes and hides herself, demanding that he leave the room. Ami is confused, and Kanan explains that her body got excited from his gaze alone, so Yuji needs to leave. Yuji agrees to her request on the condition that he can bury his face in her swimsuit, which she pointedly refuses. Disappointed, he begins moving away but slips back into the pool due to a small puddle. For some unknown reason, his face ends up in one of the flaps of Kanan's swimsuit. Embarrassed over their position, she gives him a hard slap. Feeling done with his antics, she decides to leave the pool, only to slip on the same puddle and somehow land on top of Yuji, leaving them in an odd position. Ami snaps several photos of them, urging them to continue, but both of them refuse. On another day, Yuji joins Kanan on her daily patrol around the school as Ami stalks them. Some students notice Ami, so she decides to change her outfit to look more like a gal, and then gets a dog so she can scare Yuji and Kanan together. The dog leaps toward Kanan, but Yuji pushes her out of the way. Ami cheers since it looks just like a scene in a romance drama, and Kanan is touched for a moment as she gazes at Yuji, but the moment is ruined once the dog actually bites him. Ami quickly retrieves the dog and scolds it for getting carried away. Later in the halls, Ami reviews the plan in her head. Once she is confident, she pretends to fall and knock over Kanan, causing Kanan to grab onto Yuji for support. For a moment, everything looks like it is going according to plan, but Kanan is reminded of their incident on their date and quickly moves away. Yuji realizes she is traumatized by their date and tries to convince her that she is wearing her clothes properly today. Ami refuses to give up, so she proceeds with her other plans. She kicks a soccer ball toward them, but it unfortunately knocks them both out. Later, she causes Yuji to trip onto Kanan, but he lands somewhere that causes Kanan to slap him hard across the face. She even tries to scare Kanan with konjac jelly, but Kanan ends up doing a wrestling move on Yuji to calm herself. She decides to be more direct about her plans and uses a gym cushion to force the couple together. She is less secretive about her involvement, so Kanan and Yuji actually see her as she slams the mattress onto them. They end up at the bottom, and Yuji desperately tries to keep his distance from Kanan's face as Kanan angrily demands an explanation. Ami happily tells her that Kanan can now happily kiss Yuji because the circumstances can make it seem like an accident. She begins stomping down on the mattress, forcing the couple's bodies closer together until their noses finally touch. Overwhelmed by the sensation, Kanan grows her horns to pierce through the cushion. Kanan angrily confronts Ami about her actions, and Ami immediately confesses that she made a promise to make sure Yuji and Kanan engage in a physical relationship. Her confession slightly irritates Kanan, especially since Yuji had actually liked the last incident. Later, in the disciplinary office, Kanan is finally able to complete her journal entry when Ami suddenly announces that Kanan has no charm. Kanan is confused about how she came to that conclusion, so Ami explains that she did her best to bring Yuji and Kanan closer together, but Yuji barely touched Kanan in all of her attempts. Kanan insists it is because she never gave Yuji a chance to touch her, insisting that if she did, Yuji would not be able to resist her. This makes Ami smile deviously and challenge Kanan to try something. Later, at the end of the day, Yuji heads to the office to walk Kanan home, but is surprised to see her sleeping on the couch. He finds her cute this way, and Kanan smiles to herself since this is her chance to prove to Ami that she is irresistible to him. Yuji suddenly removes his top, exciting Ami, who is watching by the window, but instead of taking advantage of Kanan, he places his top over her, turning it into a blanket, which disappoints Ami since he is such a gentleman. Even Kanan feels a bit let down, so she tries to change her position to make herself look more appealing. Yuji does feel excited to see her in a new position, but instead of acting on his desire, he begins working out to distract himself. He does this every time Kanan changes poses so he can keep himself in check. However, he completely exhausts himself, and he becomes aware that if Kanan changes into another pose, he might not be able to resist her any longer. However, Kanan is not aware of his thoughts, and in her mind she starts to think Ami is right and that she is not attractive at all. As she allows herself to spiral, Yuji cannot help himself anymore and pokes her cheek. He realizes that he had given in to his desire to do just that and runs out of the room, screaming in horror at his actions, passing Nadeshiko along the way. Back in the office, Ami returns and mentions how big of a loser Yuji is. However, she notices how Kanan's expression suddenly shifts from thoughtful to giddy over Yuji. This makes her believe that Kanan is equally hopeless when it comes to love. One morning, Yuji's homeroom teacher introduces the class to a new student named Jean, who enters wearing what appears to be a nun's uniform. When Jean is asked to introduce herself, her eyes land on Yuji, and they sparkle as she immediately makes her way toward him. However, she trips before reaching him, causing Yuji to worry. Jean quickly recovers, then grabs his hand and promises to protect him from demon attacks. Yuji is confused but warns her that her underwear is showing, though Jean does not see any issue with it. A little later, Jean is brought to the nurse's office by Yuji. Ryoko, the school nurse, asks what the problem is, and Yuji explains that Jean suddenly started talking about demons in class. Jean tells them that she is an apostle of God and that Yuji's soul is so pure and saint-like that heaven wants him to become a saint. However, demons are after his soul. She holds his hand again and promises to protect him. After a moment, Ryoko sighs and begins scribbling on a piece of paper. She tells Yuji that he is in a dangerous situation. Though she outwardly agrees with Jean, she discreetly shows Yuji a note explaining that Jean has a severe case of chunibyo, and that it is best for him to play along until she gets bored. Still in the nurse's office, Jean announces that she will place a protective charm on Yuji. She insists that he needs to be doused with a gallon of holy water. When she realizes the bottle is already empty, she decides that any liquid will suffice. She climbs on top of him and begins gathering saliva in her mouth, intending to spit on him because she believes it is what heaven has commanded. Ryoko pulls the curtain closed to give them privacy. Yuji struggles wildly against Jean, not wanting to be spit on. However, Jean insists that he must allow it or demons will get him and prevent him from joining heaven with her. Yuji panics and declines joining whatever group she is referring to, causing Jean to wail loudly enough to alert Kanan. Kanan grows curious and peeks into the nurse's office, only to see their silhouettes in what appears to be an inappropriate situation. Ryoko tells Kanan not to disturb them since they are just having fun, but Kanan refuses to allow such behavior with her livestock. She pulls open the curtain and finds Yuji and a tearful Jean. The very sight angers her because it looks like Yuji is cheating. At first, she assumes Yuji initiated the situation and threatens him, but quickly realizes he is the victim when he crawls toward her, clings to her, and expresses how terrified he was by Jean's actions. Kanan asks who Jean is and why she is passed out. Yuji honestly cannot answer since he has only just met her. When Jean lets out a pain sound, Ryoko checks her and concludes that she is simply passed out from hunger. A few moments later, Jean is stuffing her face in the disciplinary office with food provided by Kanan and Yuji. Kanan observes her closely because she can sense holy energy radiating from her body, leading her to suspect that Jean is an angel. She begins to worry that Jean might know about her plan to harvest souls in this school, but when Jean calls Kanan an angel for feeding her, Kanan becomes convinced that Jean is completely clueless. Kanan then asks why Jean is so focused on Yuji. Jean suddenly stands and explains that she is following the orders of an archangel who told her to protect Yuji from demons and that she comes from heaven. Kanan pales at this, realizing that heaven might already be aware of her plans. Meanwhile, Yuji remains confused and assumes this is all just cosplay. He comments that Jean does not seem very angel-like since she has no wings or halo. Jean becomes confused by his comment and assumes he mistook her for an angel. She clarifies that she is not an angel, but she bears a stigmata as proof that she comes from heaven. She begins lifting her skirt, but Kanan quickly tries to stop her. Jean innocently explains that her stigmata is above her navel, but Kanan insists that it is inappropriate to expose herself, even if she has something to prove. Despite this, Yuji shows interest in her explanation, which irritates Kanan. He still believes it is all part of a cosplay act and is pleased that Jean shares this interest with Kanan. While Jean believes that Yuji accepts her explanation, Kanan is surprised that he still thinks everything is just cosplay. Jean suddenly hugs Yuji, but Kanan quickly pulls him away, accusing Jean of taking advantage of him while he is vulnerable. Jean becomes confused, realizing she does not understand what that means. Kanan keeps Yuji close and declares that he belongs to her, refusing to let Jean touch him. Yuji blushes, feeling happy that Kanan is claiming him, while Kanan awkwardly tries to clarify that she meant she treats him like a possession. This causes Jean's aura to darken slightly, as heaven has claimed Yuji under its protection. Kanan prepares for a confrontation, but Jean suddenly beams at her, assuming that Kanan is simply deeply in love with Yuji. She then prays to God to bless both Kanan and Yuji's relationship. Kanan then asks if Jean knows what the demon she is supposed to protect Yuji from looks like. Jean excitedly reveals a photo of the demon, which turns out to be Kanan in her demon form. It takes her a moment to notice the resemblance, but once she does, she throws herself at Yuji to protect him from Kanan. This action angers Kanan, who finds it improper. Jean accuses Kanan of trying to charm Yuji, but Kanan throws the accusation back at her. Kanan forcefully pulls Yuji away and holds him protectively, stating that there are limits to how much he can be touched before it becomes improper. All of Kanan's words confuse Jean, who wonders if she is referring to some kind of food. Kanan does not believe Jean's innocence at all. To her, Jean's actions seem far too suggestive, so she ends up calling Jean a demon. Jean is devastated, feeling heartbroken at being called the very thing she was sent to hunt. After school, Yuji watches Kanan and Jean as it seems Jean wants to follow them on their walk home. He observes the two girls arguing over him and wonders if he somehow became popular, and whether it is supposed to make one feel uneasy. He suggests that they all just walk home together. However, this disappoints Jean, as it seems he is unwilling to let go of Kanan. She walks up to him and suddenly buries his face in her chest, promising to show him the right path since he is a servant of God. Her statement sounds contradictory to Kanan, but before she can process it, Jean is already holding Yuji's hands and rushing him out of the school. Kanan watches them run off, her eyes zeroing in on their linked hands. An unbearable rage builds within her, as she has not even held Yuji's hand yet, and Jean has already taken that first moment right in front of her. She runs after them at full speed, determined to hold Yuji's hand as well. However, in the moment the thought crosses her mind, she hesitates, fearing that something like that might lead to pregnancy. Even so, the thought of losing Yuji to Jean frustrates her even more. Gathering her courage, she finally reaches out to grab Yuji's hand, but misses because both Yuji and Jean are no longer in front of her. Jean suddenly grunts behind her, believing Kanan has cast a binding spell. In reality, her clothes have gotten caught on a tree branch, preventing her from moving forward. Kanan feels a bit sorry for her and walks over to help free her, but Jeannie insists this is some kind of demonic trick and declares she will not yield to any demon. When Jean calls her filthy, Kanan grows irritated and hurts her slightly. Jean struggles even more, trying to break free, unaware that she's only making things worse. Kanan warns her to stop, but Jean refuses to listen and continues struggling until her skirt tears, causing her to fall and hurt herself. Yuji and Kanan end up staring at Jean as she lies on the ground, attempting to crawl away while vowing not to give up despite the pain. The next day, Kanan prepares a trap for Jeannie, using Yuji as bait. She swears to make Jean pay for holding Yuji's hand the day before. As Kanan makes a speech about maintaining her pride, Yuji asks if he is helping her, and she confirms that he is, which brings tears to his eyes. Even Ami is fired up at the thought of going against someone from heaven. However, time passes and Jean does not appear. Even after the announcement to clear the school rings, she still does not show up. This irritates Kanan, as Jean did not even bother coming to school. Later, Kanan decides to search for Jean around town. They head to a bridge by the riverbank, as their intel suggests that Jean is staying there. They spot a cardboard box and Kanan is surprised that heaven would send someone to live in such conditions. They sneak closer and peek inside. They see an old man asking Jean for forgiveness, which she grants, saying that God forgives him. The homeless man feels relieved, hugs her legs, and offers her a snack. At the sight of food, Jean cheers and begins eating as soon as the man leaves. By then, Ami and Kanan have already entered the shelter, commenting on how meager the offering is. Jean is surprised to see them, but Kanan questions her suspicious behavior, especially since she abandoned Yuji despite claiming to protect him. Jean struggles to explain while eating, but once she finishes, she says that she has started guiding lost children of God and offering confession services. Kanan steps outside and sees a long line of men waiting to confess. Two thugs get angry at her for cutting in line. They complain about how long they have been waiting, hoping to rest on Jean's thighs during confession. They even admit they have been committing sins on purpose just to come back. This angers Kanan, who scolds them for having filthy souls. To Jean's horror, Kanan drives all the men away, effectively cutting off her food supply. Back inside, Jean cries over her loss while Kanan lectures her on not encouraging sin just to receive offerings. Jean calls Kanan a demon, especially now that Kanan has prevented her from getting food. Kanan finds her pathetic and suggests she simply return to heaven. Jean says she would like to return but cannot until she completes her mission. She begins describing heaven as a paradise with pleasant weather, abundant food and wine, and beautiful people. Kanan studies her blissful expression as she talks, but Jean quickly corrects herself and insists she cannot leave Yuji alone with a demon like Kanan who plans on eating him. Kanan admits that she does not actually plan to eat him yet, which piques Jean's curiosity. Kanan struggles to explain her relationship with Yuji, so Ami interrupts and bluntly tells Jean that Kanan wants to do naughty things with him. Jean is confused, thinking it sounds like some kind of demonic ritual. When Kanan denies it, Jean insists on an explanation. Kanan awkwardly tries to explain things like touching and kissing, but Jean still does not understand, as she does not even know what kissing is. Seeing Kanan struggle, Ami steps in and simplifies it by saying it is basically mating. Jean understands mating as something done to produce children, which confuses her further as to why Kanan would want that with a human. To clarify, Ami whispers the details to her and even shows her videos, which completely shocks Jean. She had believed babies were delivered by storks, and the truth overwhelms her so much that she heads outside to cry from all the information. The next day at school, Jean returns, but she is clearly distracted by what she learned. Yuji is slightly concerned, as she was like that throughout the day, though Kanan pays her no mind. Finally, gathering her courage, Kanan takes Yuji's hand and suggests they walk home together. Yuji beams with happiness and agrees, leaving Jean behind to process everything on her own. One morning, Jean runs toward Kanan and Yuji while they are walking to school together. Kanan gives her an unimpressed look because Jean chose to wear a sailor uniform instead of the regular school uniform. Jean reasons that at school they must wear uniforms, but Kanan lightly scolds Jean about the proper uniform she should be wearing. However, she is shocked when she notices Yuji completely smitten with Jean's outfit choice. As Yuji continues complimenting Jean while walking to class, Kanan suddenly stops walking and fumes behind them because Yuji is giving Jean more attention. She decides that Yuji needs to be disciplined for this act of unfaithfulness. Activating a portion of her powers, she swears to use them to teach him a lesson about loyalty. At the disciplinary office, Kanan allows her powers to seep out of the room and surround her entire body, though she lowers them once she starts feeling self-conscious about how she looks in a sailor uniform. Yuji enters the office shortly after and reacts in shock upon seeing her. He grows excited and slowly approaches Kanan, admiring her from every angle, which only makes her too nervous to properly explain herself since she is busy trying to cover how she looks. Kanan suddenly hears Jean approaching and realizes that if Jean sees her dressed in a sailor uniform, she will definitely tease her for copying her style, and she does not think she can live with that embarrassment. So Kanan quickly pulls Yuji away to hide. Jean and Nadeshiko enter the room and find it strange that nobody is around. Jean becomes suspicious and starts sniffing the area because she is certain she can still smell Yuji nearby as Nadeshiko helps. Meanwhile, Yuji and Kanan are pressed tightly together inside a cramped locker. Yuji squirms slightly from how overwhelmed he feels. He admits that he is getting excited about how close they are, especially with Kanan wearing such a cute uniform. Kanan's blush deepens at the compliment, but both of them tense up when they hear Jean standing directly in front of their locker, announcing that Yuji's scent is the strongest near the locker. Jean is about to open it, but the moment she does, she gets distracted by a snack bag that Nadeshiko found and instead focuses on getting it from Nadeshiko. When the locker shuts again, Kanan and Yuji let out sighs of relief. Yuji then asks why Kanan wore a sailor uniform if she did not want anyone else seeing it. Kanan shyly admits that she would feel embarrassed if others caught her wearing it, but she still chose to wear one because she hoped Yuji would like it. Without hesitation, Yuji admits that he does. Kanan nervously asks whether he means he only likes the uniform, or if he means something else entirely. Yuji slowly leans closer despite his shaking hands, and Kanan begins to panic internally, convinced she will completely lose herself if he kisses her. Before their lips can meet, Yuji's phone suddenly vibrates, causing Kanan to jump. Jean immediately accuses them of trying to make a baby. Yuji loudly announces that his heart is racing as well. The next day, Kanan lies in bed, not really ready to go to school today. She is wondering how she is supposed to face Yuji after yesterday's incident. When Ami reminds her of the time, Kanan finally gets ready for school, though she still leaves the house feeling disheartened. Even when Yuji appears and asks to walk with her, the troubled expression does not leave her face. Ami watches the two with a smile as another plan forms in her mind. During the train ride to school, Yuji cages Kanan against the door to keep other passengers from bumping into her. However, a sudden jolt causes their faces to move dangerously close together, making both of them nervously apologize. Kanan internally scolds herself for acting so flustered, since a demon in a love contract should not let things like this affect her. However, Yuji notices how bothered she seems, so he suddenly suggests that they skip school and go somewhere else instead. He ends up bringing Kanan to the sea near their town, and the atmosphere quickly relaxes her enough that she starts running around and playing in the water, since this is her first time visiting the sea. She teasingly scolds Yuji for being a bad influence because he convinced an honor student like her to skip school. Yuji laughs and admits that he was not trying to scheme anything. He simply wanted to create precious memories with her. His words make Kanan freeze as she finally realizes the situation they are in. It is just the two of them in an undeniably romantic setting, and she starts thinking that Yuji might actually try to kiss her this time after failing to do so yesterday. When Yuji invites her to sit by the shore, Kanan nervously refuses, claiming she does not want to sit on the dirty ground. Without warning, Yuji picks her up and has her sit on his lap instead so she will not have to touch the ground. The gesture leaves Kanan incredibly flustered. She cannot believe how perfectly Yuji is acting, since these are exactly the kinds of experiences girls dream about having with their boyfriends. When Yuji softly calls her name, Kanan becomes convinced that this is finally the moment they are going to kiss. She tries to state reasons why they should not kiss yet, but Yuji insists that she's perfectly fine with how she looks. She closes her eyes and puckers her lips in preparation, but instead, Yuji simply takes a photo of them together for memory's sake. As he happily admires the picture, Kanan gets off his lap and trembles with a mixture of embarrassment and frustration over all the emotions he keeps putting her through. She's about to scold him for toying with her heart when a speeding boat sends a wave crashing over the two of them. When the water settles, Kanan finds herself lying on top of Yuji as both of them drip with seawater. Rather than getting angry, she suddenly starts laughing together with him over their ridiculous situation. Meanwhile, Ami eventually gives up trying to find them and complains about how boring the day has become without Kanan. However, she soon spots Jean, who is apparently tracking Yuji by scent. Since Yuji never arrived at school, Jean believes Kanan must have abducted him, so she makes it her duty to rescue him. Jean suddenly gets distracted by a dangling snack placed in front of her and dives for it, only to get caught by Ami, who decides to treat her like a fish. Ami asks Jean to lead her to Yuji, but Jean refuses to cooperate with the demon. Ami tempts her further with the snack, though Jean initially resists surprisingly well. So Ami pulls out a newer and much larger snack instead, immediately capturing Jean's full attention. Even then, Jean still tries to refuse it, though her resistance weakens once Ami slowly opens the snack and threatens to eat it herself. Eventually, Jean gives in. As she happily munches away, she apologizes to the angels for helping the demon. Back with Kanan and Yuji, the two decide to rent a room at an internet cafe so they can dry themselves properly. Yuji returns carrying fresh clothes for both of them as they prepare to change. When Kanan warns him not to peek, Yuji laughs in a way that makes it very obvious he had already considered doing exactly that. However, Yuji disagrees and insists that he is a gentleman. Even so, Kanan refuses to take any chances and uses a blindfold on him to prevent him from seeing her. She then announces that she will be changing now that she is sure he cannot see. Outside the establishment, Jean leads Ami in front of the building, insisting that Yuji is definitely inside. Ami reads the sign that says it is an internet cafe, making Jean puzzled because she does not understand what the internet is, so Ami casually explains that it can do anything. Ami then grows excited at the thought that Kanan and Yuji might be getting intimate in a private room. The idea immediately sends Jean into a panic, causing her to rush into the building to stop Yuji from getting corrupted. Inside the room, the couple faces away from each other, but Kanan still feels nervous about changing clothes with Yuji nearby. As she removes her damp clothes, she keeps wondering what might happen if he accidentally sees her. Meanwhile, Yuji is also nervous yet excited, knowing that Kanan is changing behind him. He can clearly hear every movement she makes and starts imagining which articles of clothing she is taking off. He wonders why his hearing suddenly feels so sharp before deciding that it must somehow be because of the blindfold. This leaves him conflicted because, at that moment, he really wants to see what she looks like. Based on what he knows about Kanan, he imagines her choice of undergarments might be surprisingly daring. Kanan suddenly calls out to him and tells him to turn around. When Yuji turns and removes the blindfold, he is greeted by an irritated Kanan wearing the devil costume he personally picked out for her. He immediately tells her that it suits her perfectly. Outside the room, Ami and Jean become distracted by all the amenities inside the building and fail to notice Kanan and Yuji leaving. By the time they enter the room the couple had been using is already empty. Jean notices the computer and asks if that is the internet, to which Ami confidently replies that it is. Ami swears that she will find Kanan, while Jean kneels in front of the computer and prays to it for more snacks. Meanwhile, Kanan notices a nearby Ferris wheel, and Yuji realizes that it is her first time seeing one. Kanan mentions not having one in the demon realm, and Yuji assumes it is just the name of her hometown and not the actual demon realm. Yuji notices how curious Kanan looks and offers to take her on the ride, but Kanan refuses, saying she is no longer a child who needs to experience such a thing. Still, she tells him that if he wants to ride it, then she does not mind joining him. Once they are on the Ferris wheel, Kanan cannot help looking out the glass panels because of how amazing the view is. After calming herself, she sits in front of Yuji and asks for the real reason he wanted to skip school with her today. Yuji struggles to explain himself, so Kanan only catches that he really wanted to do something with her, and that it starts with an S. She assumes he means smooch, remembering what almost happened yesterday. However, Yuji finally blurts out that he wants to squander their youth, making Kanan blush after realizing she misunderstood him again. Yuji explains that skipping class to go to the beach with his girlfriend is something every high schooler dreams about. He also admits that he noticed Kanan looked uneasy during the train ride, so he wanted to surprise her by doing something that would make her happy. Kanan grows thoughtful as she looks back at the scenery. She tells Yuji that she had fun and that he did a good job. She finally faces him and tells him to keep surprising her like this because she loves going to places with him. Yuji becomes flustered, and Kanan quickly realizes how her words sounded and tries to correct herself by stating that she did not mean it in a romantic sense. However, Yuji becomes so happy that he starts jumping excitedly, causing their cart to shake. Kanan eventually loses her balance and lands on Yuji's lap, where he securely holds her in place to prevent her from getting hurt. Before things can go any further, Kanan notices Ami and Jin in the cart behind them, both shouting at the pair while arguing with each other about what the couple should or should not do. The interruption ruins the mood, so Kanan gets off Yuji's lap and wonders how those two even found them. She then sits beside Yuji and announces that she is tired and wants to lean on his shoulder. As she gets comfortable, she tells him they should stay like this until the ride ends. One day, Yuji and Nadeshiko beg Kanan to tutor them. She's uninterested at first, which only makes their pleading more desperate. Nadeshiko explains that she wants to aim for a higher ranking, and since Kanan is known as the top student, she wants her help. Meanwhile, Yuji points out that if he fails to improve his grades, his entire summer will be wasted on remedial classes. To convince her further, the two begin calling her teacher. Kanan enjoys the title and decides to play along, even changing into a more mature outfit. Nadeshiko stares admiringly at Kanan. Ever since meeting her, she has felt strange and slowly begun to realize she might actually be attracted to Kanan. Getting down to business, Kanan asks which subjects they struggle with. When Yuji admits he is bad at math, Kanan immediately scolds him, saying his understanding is practically at an elementary school level. Nadeshiko watches their interaction carefully, which makes Kanan realize she likely needs help in math too. Snapping out of her thoughts, Nadeshiko agrees and Kanan tells her to solve some practice problems so she can check her progress. Kanan asks Yuji to try one as well, but he admits he cannot do it, earning another lecture from Kanan about at least trying. Nadeshiko suddenly wants Kanan's attention too, so she quickly announces that she has already answered some problems. Kanan walks over and checks her work while making approving sounds. She smiles at Nadeshiko and calls her favorite student, praising her for getting everything correct. The compliment makes Nadeshiko's heart flutter. Meanwhile, Yuji continues struggling even while Kanan tries teaching him. Nadeshiko notices how harshly Kanan insults Yuji and wonders if she would receive the same treatment if she intentionally made mistakes. So she purposely answers a set of questions horribly and asks Kanan to check them. Kanan looks puzzled after seeing every answer wrong. Instead of scolding her, Kanan praises her for using the correct process and gently advises her to solve the problems more carefully next time. Nadeshiko feels disappointed because she wants to be scolded. Kanan then returns to insulting a miserable Yuji for repeating the same mistake. Determined, Nadeshiko intentionally repeats the same error and asks Kanan to look over her answers again. Once more, Kanan does not get angry. Instead, she calmly encourages her to keep trying, explaining that mistakes can help people remember what they did wrong. At this point, Nadeshiko feels close to tears. After a while, Yuji reaches his limit and suddenly declares that the formula looks dirty, which earns him another harsh scolding. Kanan even calls him a monkey. Nadeshiko realizes she might need to make dirty jokes too if she wants the same treatment, so she attempts to imitate Yuji. However, instead of insulting her, Kanan simply asks if she would like to take a break. Unable to hold it in anymore, Nadeshiko bursts into tears, completely confusing Kanan. Nadeshiko explains that Kanan and Yuji were intimate earlier, and she wanted Kanan to scold her the same way she scolds Yuji. When Kanan awkwardly asks if something might be wrong with her, Nadeshiko gives her a very strange look. Later, Kanan returns to her fake home and takes a shower. While she's bathing, Mrs. Takakiyo receives a phone call from Beelzebub, who introduces himself as Kanan's father. Mrs. Takakiyo becomes confused, especially when she hears Lilum, Kanan's real mother, speaking in the background. Lilum then politely introduces herself as Kanan's mother and thanks Mrs. Takakiyo for taking care of Kanan all this time. At that moment, Mrs. Takakiyo suddenly realizes something. As Kanan dries her hair, Mrs. Takakiyo suddenly enters and announces that her mother and father just called. Kanan immediately panics and starts trying to explain herself, but it turns out Mrs. Takakiyo completely misunderstood the situation. In her mind, she still believes she is Kanan's real mother, so she assumes the callers must have been Kanan's sugar mommy and sugar daddy. With exams finally over, Yuji loudly celebrates because he passed and will not need remedial classes. Kanan, however, does not seem pleased. She suddenly leashes him and rubs her head against his chest, confusing him. Ami explains that Kanan is only acting that way because she will miss him during summer break. Kanan quickly scolds him, insisting that she is merely worried the students will slack off and misbehave during vacation. She also complains that Yuji seems far too excited about summer break. Yuji smiles and tells her that all the activities he mentioned wanting to do over the summer were things he planned on doing with her. Kanan immediately blushes, though she suddenly grows quiet afterward. Ami then explains that Kanan has to return to the demon realm during the summer. Yuji asks if that means they will not be able to see each other at all, but Kanan clarifies that she will not be there for the entire break. Without hesitation, Yuji suggests accompanying her to her hometown, and to Ami's surprise, Kanan actually considers it. However, Ami quickly reminds Kanan that humans literally turn into mush when they enter the demon realm. Kanan walks up to Yuji and reminds him that she comes from a noble family, so someone like him cannot casually wander around her hometown. Ami nods approvingly, believing Kanan is trying to discourage him. But then Kanan suddenly adds that if he begs hard enough, she might grant him special permission to accompany her. Ami panics immediately because Yuji instantly begs to go with her. Since he asks so sincerely, Kanan decides to allow him to come along, though Ami nervously questions whether this is really a good idea. Kanan realizes this will be the first time she has ever brought someone home. She immediately starts panicking and muttering about all the preparations she needs to make. Despite her earlier concerns, Ami cannot help smiling at Kanan's unexpectedly gentle expression. One day, Jean accompanies Kanan and the others as they shop for souvenirs and summer essentials. Kanan notices that Jean is still with them and asks why she keeps following them. Jean simply replies that she goes wherever Yuji goes. Nachiko approaches them, surprised to see everyone at the mall. Once they reach the swimsuit section, Kanan quickly announces that she does not need a swimsuit since she already owns one. However, Ami points out that her only swimsuit is the school-issued one. Ami suggests that everyone pick out swimsuits and show them off so they can all give their opinions. Eugene and Jean become the most enthusiastic about the idea, making Kanan uneasy. But when Jean asks if she is shy, Kanan quickly denies it. Ami declares that everyone should now split up and choose their outfits. As Kanan browses the racks, she starts wondering what kind of swimsuit Yuji would want to see her wear. The moment she realizes what she is thinking, she immediately tries to push the thought away. Still, one particular swimsuit catches her attention. Meanwhile, Ami searches for something mature, hoping to make Kanan nervous. Nadeshiko also searches through the racks, though she questions how she even got dragged into this situation. She feels embarrassed and unworthy of showing herself to Kanan, but the thought of humiliating herself somehow excites her. Jean, on the other hand, loses enthusiasm for choosing a swimsuit. Eventually, everyone returns to the meeting area and heads into the changing rooms. Ami is the first to reveal her choice, wearing a white two-piece swimsuit that contrasts beautifully with her dark skin. Next is Nadeshiko, whose swimsuit resembles more of a bodysuit than an actual swimsuit. Then Jean steps out, leaving Yuji completely confused by her outfit. He can only describe it as looking like a pig costume. The sales lady quickly appears and explains that she was the one who coordinated Jean's outfit. She admits that nothing fit Jean properly, so this was the only option available. However, she corrects Yuji by explaining that it is not actually a pig costume, but smoked ham. Jean stares at the stockings that resemble ham, which only makes her hungry. Ami then calls for Kanan to come out, but Kanan suddenly feels very self-conscious. Growing impatient, Ami pulls the curtain open herself. The room falls quiet for a moment, and before Yuji can react, Kanan awkwardly points out that she knows she looks childish. However, Yuji immediately calls her cute and says she wins his vote because she looks effortlessly pretty without needing to show too much skin. Seeing how sincere Yuji looks makes her chest tighten warmly as she gives a confident smile. At exactly 3:33 in the morning, something demonic occurs at a quiet train station. One of the parked trains suddenly transforms into a special train bound for the demon realm. Yuji is amazed that a train is operating at such an odd hour, while Kanan explains that it is a private train heading to House Zebel. Once everyone boards, the train begins its journey toward the demon realm. Jean stares outside in wonder at the strange lights rushing past the windows, while Kanan questions why she followed them again. As time passes, all the girls begin feeling uncomfortable. Kanan desperately needs to use the restroom, but feels too embarrassed to admit it in front of Yuji. Jean also needs the restroom, but refuses to leave Yuji alone with Kanan. Ami is struggling too, but seeing Kanan and Jean suffer in silence is simply too entertaining to leave. Eventually, Jean cannot hold it anymore and suddenly stands up to excuse herself. However, Kanan quickly stretches herself across Yuji and taunts Jean, saying that if she leaves, she might use the opportunity to corrupt Yuji's soul. Jean immediately sits back down. Now believing it is safe, Kanan attempts to leave. But the moment she tries stepping past Yuji, he asks where she's going. Panicking, Kanan claims she only wants her luggage. Yuji offers to get it for her instead, then places her heavy backpack directly onto her lap. Feeling satisfied, Ami finally decides to head for the restroom herself, only for Kanan to kick her shin and force her to stay and suffer with them. The painful train ride continues for the girls. Noticing the tense atmosphere, Yuji decides to lighten the mood. He suddenly holds up a tumbler and happily announces that he wants everyone to try the coffee he made. He proudly explains that he specially ground premium coffee beans for Kanan because he wanted her to taste the best coffee possible. Kanan feels touched by the gesture, but drinking anything right now sounds dangerous. Still, she cannot refuse when Yuji looks at her so sincerely. The moment she takes a sip, she feels it is the most delicious coffee she has ever tasted, and her body relaxes instantly. Seeing her pleased expression makes Yuji incredibly happy. Meanwhile, Kanan quietly begins tearing up because she feels like she's about to explode. Jean drinks some too and suffers the same conflict between bliss and agony, while Ami simply suffers in silence. Judging by their reactions, Yuji concludes that his coffee was a success. However, he suddenly notices Kanan looking pale as she weakly asks whether he would still accept her no matter what. Without hesitation, Yuji grabs her hand and confidently promises that he will. Kanan feels genuinely happy hearing those words from him. Just as she feels she has finally reached her limit, Yuji suddenly announces that he needs to use the restroom and casually walks away. The girls instantly spring to life and race toward the restroom after him. However, before Jean even reaches it, she suddenly relaxes in relief. Meanwhile, in the demon realm, Miel and Milch discuss Kanan's return and the fact that she is bringing a lover with her. Milch, in particular, seems very interested in finding out how Yuji's soul might taste. In the demon realm, Beelzebub is in the middle of eating when he is informed that Kanan has finally arrived back home. He asks if she is still cute, and his maid responds that she is absolutely adorable as always. The maid then informs him that Kanan actually brought home her lover, which completely shocks Beelzebub. At the front entrance, Yuji is stunned by the size and appearance of Kanan's home. He asks if she is some kind of noble, and Kanan reminds him that she already told him that before. As Yuji notices how ominous the entire area looks, Jean grows excited since she assumes this is simply some unfamiliar region in Japan. However, when she is told that it is actually the demon realm, she becomes shocked, while Yuji still somehow thinks it is just another prefecture. When they enter the mansion, Jean is nervous at first, but her nerves quickly turn into excitement when several maids bow and greet them like royalty. As Yuji hands his bags over to one of the maids, he asks to use the restroom. After getting directions from Kanan, he heads there himself. However, he ends up getting lost while trying to return to her. While wandering the halls, he runs into Lilim, Kanan's mother, who at first appears to be a calm and elegant woman. However, the moment Yuji approaches her, she suddenly cowers in fear at the sight of him. Yuji assumes she is frightened because there is a suspicious man nearby, so he quickly positions himself in front of her to protect her. Unfortunately, the sight of his backside so close to her face only makes Lilim panic even more. Suddenly, Milch kicks him while Mile comforts Lilim. The sisters scold Yuji for frightening her. At first, Yuji is too distracted by how adorable they both are, but then he suddenly remembers there is supposedly still a dangerous man nearby. Mile then explains that he is the suspicious man, revealing that Lilim suffers from an extreme case of androphobia. Yuji pales after being called suspicious. At the same time, the demons suddenly realize that he is actually human. When he confirms that he is, Milch becomes excited and calls him a pig, even asking if she can eat him. Yuji gets excited at the offer and is about to accept until he suddenly remembers that he is currently dating Kanan. The demons stare at him oddly, and it finally dawns on them that Yuji might be the human Kanan was planning to bring home. Yuji then asks if the demons are Kanan's family, prompting them to introduce themselves. Meanwhile, in the throne room, Kanan nervously faces Beelzebub. When he asks if she brought home a lover, Kanan immediately begins to panic because she expects to be scolded. She struggles to think of how to explain her situation with Yuji, but Beelzebub completely surprises her by reacting enthusiastically to the news. He congratulates her, and soon even Lilim offers Kanan her congratulations as well. Lilim explains that because of her androphobia, she always feared she would never be able to teach Kanan the secrets of romance and attraction. However, she admits that she feels relieved believing that Kanan is dating Jean because she thinks girls should absolutely be allowed to date girls, and the fact that Jean is from heaven is an added bonus. Kanan is left confused about how her family somehow came to the conclusion that she is dating Jean, while Milch looks completely unimpressed with Jean. Kanan quickly denies it and hurriedly tries to clear up the misunderstanding by explaining that her lover is actually Yuji. As she awkwardly explains the contract between them, the girls and her family become disappointed before suddenly realizing something important about Yuji. Lilim nervously tries to explain that they already gave instructions to prepare Yuji. A few moments later, one of the maids enters while pulling a food cart carrying a massive silver tray. She explains that they originally assumed Yuji was a souvenir from the human world and had prepared him to be the family's main course. When the tray is uncovered, Kanan immediately panics and demands to know why Yuji allowed people to undress him and present him like food. Yuji casually explains that he assumed it was part of her family's traditions. Yuji then notices Beelzebub standing beside Kanan and realizes that he is her father. He quickly straightens himself and respectfully introduces himself as Kanan's boyfriend. Kanan feels her heart flutter hearing how confident Yuji sounds while introducing himself. After Yuji finishes dressing himself, Kanan walks over to his side and admits that she thought he looked cool earlier. As she playfully teases him, Beelzebub suddenly announces that Kanan is forbidden from dating a human, causing Kanan to scream in disbelief. However, Beelzebub quickly reveals that he was only joking. He explains that he is not completely against them dating as long as Yuji and Kanan can prove themselves first. He hands Kanan a stamped collection card, stating that all 4 family members must approve of their relationship before they can officially date. Kanan is annoyed that she needs everyone's approval, but Yuji eagerly agrees to the challenge. He explains that he wants to properly date Kanan, and that means earning her family's approval. He even refers to it as a trial of love, which makes Kanan's heart flutter again. The rest of her family is impressed that he can say such things with a completely straight face. First, Kanan asks Milch to stamp the card, but she refuses immediately. Mel refuses as well, and Lilim cannot even bring herself to go near Yuji. Though she admits that she wants to support Kanan, she simply cannot handle being around men. Yuji then comes up with an idea and puts on a maid uniform in order to appear more feminine. Kanan thinks he looks adorable, so Yuji approaches Lilim again while even introducing himself as Yuko to make the disguise more convincing. However, Lilim immediately points out that he still has visible leg hair. Kanan realizes that her mother is also extremely sensitive to secondary male characteristics. Kanan then pulls out a potion and tells Yuji to drink it. Without hesitation, he obeys her immediately. Kanan is just about to explain when the potion suddenly transforms Yuji into a baby. Kanan instantly falls in love with baby Yuji and happily holds him close. Lilim carefully takes baby Yuji into her arms and becomes amazed at how cute and innocent he looks. She even wishes he could stay a baby forever. Unfortunately, the potion quickly wears off. The shock immediately causes Lilim to faint while Kanan panics. The group later moves to the kitchen where Lilim offers to bake them a cake since she still cannot bring herself to stamp the approval card. Both Yuji and Kanan become excited, but Lilim nervously asks Yuji not to look at her while she bakes. She quietly adds that she also does not want to be anywhere near him either. Seeing how happy Yuji is that Lilim is baking them a cake despite struggling with his presence, Kanan puts on an apron and asks if she could help as well. Lilim finds it suspicious that Kanan wants to help when she has never cooked before. However, as she watches Yuji and Kanan interact, she realizes it is all to please Yuji and she finds the two of them sweet together. The first thing they need to do is cut some apples, but Lilim immediately points out that Kanan is holding the knife wrong. She helps Kanan cut the first apple and tells Kanan to try doing it by herself. However, Kanan still struggles, so Lilim suggests practicing with toys first, but Kanan stubbornly refuses. Kanan eventually manages to peel and cut the apples, so Lilim decides to record the moment because this is Kanan's first attempt at cooking. As she records, Kanan fails several times and makes a huge mess, but Lilim still counts it as a success. She even decides that the cooking tools are too precious to wash and considers displaying them to commemorate Kanan's first cooking attempt. She also tells Kanan that it is wonderful that she wants to cook for Yuji. As Kanan desperately tries to convince her that no feelings are involved, Lilim silently thanks Yuji for giving her the opportunity to cook with Kanan. She spots Yuji trying to sneak a bite, so she slaps his hand away from the food while lightly scolding him. Kanan immediately notices that Lilim just touched Yuji and points it out, which instantly sends Lilim into a state of panic. After some time, the apple cake is finally finished, but before they dig in, Lilim reminds Kanan that they still need to do one more thing. Both girls make a heart sign with their hands and do a love beam at the cake. Yuji immediately exclaims that both of them are adorable, which stirs something in Lilim's heart. She recalls that it has been thousands of years since she last touched a human man. Yuji asks Kanan to do one more love beam, and as she does it, her siblings catch her right in the middle of it. They instantly tease her for suddenly cooking just because Yuji is visiting. Kanan quickly defends herself, saying that since Yuji is a guest, he deserves a proper treat, prompting Milch to suddenly try to steal a first bite. However, Kanan quickly stops her. She struggles to explain why she wants Yuji to be the first person to taste her cake. However, Milch immediately figures it out, though Kanan denies it and claims that Yuji should be the first to eat it in case the cake tastes bad. Yuji happily accepts the offered slice, praising the cake several times before taking a bite, which allows Milch to snatch the plate away and smugly tell Kanan that she should just feed Yuji. When Milch asks Yuji whether he wants to be fed, he readily agrees, but Milch teasingly tells him that it is too bad Kanan does not want to feed him. That makes Kanan agree to do it, while Lilim is still too lost in thought to properly notice what is happening. Kanan carefully prepares the first bite for Yuji, and as he opens his mouth to receive the cake, Milch suddenly jumps between them and eats it herself. This immediately angers Kanan, though Milch casually tells her not to get so mad because the cake was delicious. She then grabs another piece and suddenly shoves it into his mouth. Yuji immediately tells them that it tastes amazing, making Milch smugly point out that it is even more delicious because it was the fork she used, meaning she and Yuji had just shared an indirect kiss. At that realization, Kanan desperately tries to control the eruption of anger boiling beneath her. When Milch asks her what is wrong, she quickly notices Kanan glaring at her and immediately claims it was only an innocent prank. Milch argues that since Kanan and Yuji are a couple, kissing and other intense things should already be normal between them. However, upon seeing how strongly Kanan reacted, she suddenly realizes that this was probably Yuji's first kiss experience of any kind, causing her to call the two of them pathetic. Kanan finally lets her anger boil over and begins chasing Milch all around the kitchen. Milch quickly runs toward her mother for protection, only to notice that Lilim is in a trance-like state while eating the cake. Lilim suddenly snaps out of it, then realizes that Yuji probably wants to try the cake, making it the second indirect kiss he receives and causing Kanan to grow furious all over again. Meanwhile, Jean is busy stuffing her face with meat beside Beelzebub, who genuinely enjoys her company because of her massive appetite. Jean herself starts believing that there really is heaven inside the demon realm after all. After things finally calm down, Kanan and Yuji once again ask Lilim if she will stamp their approval card. She lets out a sigh before agreeing, though only after Yuji completes a proper trial first. She explains that it is necessary because it is a long-standing Zabel family tradition. Curious, Yuji asks what kind of trial he has to complete, and Lilim first warns him that he must not succumb to desire. However, she then reveals that the actual trial is a test of courage. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to see what happens next.